First thing I want to say about service is a choice. You choose to invest in your service. You choose to have a service model. You choose to be client focused, which means you have to be learning from your clients all the time. You have to be investing in your service all the time, and you have to be improving it all the time, because people's expectations of service aren't generated in your small industry. They're generated all around you from the experiences that your clients have in their everyday life. And so at AssetMark, our service and operations team, which leads the charge on service, they're obsessed with their clients, and they talk about being obsessed with their clients all the time. If we want to do a great job for our clients, what will we do? If we want to be obsessed with our clients, what would we do? How do we wow our clients?
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSalle here, president of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And we have a pretty special and important guest joining us today, Natalie Woflsen, who is the CEO of AssetMark. And I'm really excited to have her on the show today. We're going to be talking a lot about some of the current market conditions and how you can utilize that to stay close with your clients, talking about various growth paths that advisors can follow, as well as making sure that service is really at the heart of everything that an advisor does. So with that, Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate being here.
Love it. Well, give us a sense, I guess, just to start off, give us a sense of your background. And I'm willing to bet you have a fairly interesting journey going from whenever you got started in your career to ultimately becoming the CEO of AssetMark, which is a publicly traded company. So would love to hear about that journey of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do my best to keep it brief. So, I've been in financial services since the mid 90s and was very lucky, actually. When I graduated Cal Berkeley in the mid 90s, I graduated with a degree in political science. And so when I went looking for my first job, as many people do after they get out of college, I was very fortunate that I had an internship in marketing. And so I got my first job at American Express in marketing and found my way very randomly into financial services. And I cannot tell you how thankful I am for that every day. Financial services is a really important industry. It makes a huge impact on people's lives. Every day we go to work, we can make a difference. I love that about financial services. It's also incredibly broad and really creative. So you have an opportunity to learn every single day. So after starting in payments, I then moved very quickly to brokerage and spent most of my career in brokerage and banking. And after working at Schwab in a variety of positions in marketing, technology, product development, meaning investment product development and strategy, then did product development at Pershing, then worked at a large asset manager in marketing and product development, then came to AssetMark. And since I've been at AssetMark, the last 8 years have really had the fortune to help many independent fee-based advisors make a huge difference in the lives of their clients, also their lives and their teammates' lives. And then about a year and a half ago, I was asked to be CEO, and I consider myself one of the most fortunate people in financial services to be leading such a great team of people with such wonderful clients.
I love it. Now, what was your role at AssetMark before becoming CEO?
My role was Chief Solutions Officer. So I was basically responsible for all new growth initiatives, whether it was new channels, new technology, new investment solutions, all of that rolled up in my organization. And in addition to that, I worked on strategy with the previous CEO.
Cool. And then what do you think, and maybe this was direct feedback that was shared to you, or perhaps we can just kind of be reflective on that journey, but there had to have been some things, whether it be tangible or intangible, that you had done in that role to even be considered to run the entire shop. What were some of those things that you think kind of put you at the top of the list to help run the organization as CEO?
So a few things that I think were really important and are important to anyone when they're growing their career or want to take the next step to a broader role. And the most important, I think, is you have to have breadth. So, it feels really great to be an expert on one thing. I really enjoy technology product development as an example. But if you only do that one thing beautifully, it's hard to take that to the next level because you need to lead people, you need to lead teams that do more than that. And your perspective needs to be a lot broader than that. because you can't be a one-note CEO. You have to understand different market environments. You have to understand different clients, different complexities. And so one really important, I think, attribute of my career is that I tried a lot of things. And as a result, was able to have broad perspectives to bring to the companies I worked for. Second thing I'll just say is while you're developing that breadth and those multiple points of view, you also learn a lot about what motivates different people in different roles and what success means to them. And you need the whole organization to come together and succeed if you want to succeed. And so the ability to do that is extremely important. The last thing I'll just say is, well, there's two things really. The first is a little bit more tactical or mechanical. You really have to understand business. Whatever product, solution, service you're providing, you need to be an expert on that. And you need to be an expert on your client. Because if you don't know your client, then you can't make the right decisions. And you also really need to understand business, how money's made, how expenses grow, how to have a healthy, thriving business. So I often, mentor young people who are super excited about being in marketing, or really excited about being in investments, or incredibly excited about being in technology. And that's wonderful. But regardless of all of that, you need to understand your client, the business you're in, because you can't make good decisions unless you know that first. And then you also just need to understand business. And that's extremely important the more senior you get.
And there was something that you said, I'm not going to quote it back to you verbatim, but something about, needing to know multiple different topics to be able to run an organization. You don't need to know them perfectly, but enough to where you can empower other people to take it over the finish line. So I'd imagine, and I'm wired in a similar way, so I'm curious to know if this is true in your case, where throughout your career, if I were to guess, you said yes more often than you said no in terms of opportunities that came across the desk and, things that you were tasked with or made aware of within the companies that you're at previously. And you're like, yep, I'll do that. And then you just kind of work to figure it out. Is that a fair assumption?
That is a fair assumption. And, I often say to folks, opportunities inconvenient. So, the best opportunities you're going to get in life come at times where you don't feel you're totally ready for them, or where the environment's not perfect. And, it's those opportunities that create the springboard for your career. And so I'm a person that when someone asks me to do something, regardless how complex or hairy, whatever it was, I always said yes. And then I think it's really important to be humble about what you know and what you don't, so that you can ask the right questions, you can do the right research, you can call on your network, so that you're saying yes to those opportunities that are a little scary. And then you're also doing your best possible work for those opportunities. The other thing I'll just say is I also say, can I a lot? Meaning, I see something, or teams, really high performers see something in the organization that they think is an opportunity. I've heard something from a client that they think is exciting and can be transformative. The really, really great and talented folks in an organization, they'll say, hey, can I learn more about that? Or can I research that? Or can I take that on? And it's not can as in, am I able? It's sort of, I want to do this. And I've done that a lot in my career. And every successful person I've ever met does the combination of yes and can I.
As you were going through that, there were two books that popped into my mind that I've read that really resonated with me. And you kind of just hit on the importance of that. And I just want to talk about that for a quick moment. So one of the books is called The Ego is the Enemy. So you mentioned about being humble. And the other one the book is called Who, Not How, which you can kind of deduce what that book is about based on the title. And what I really like about what you said is you don't need to know everything. You just need to make that commitment to solve that problem or challenge in front of you. And then your RAS, your reticular activating system, the filter in your brain, will help seek out the solutions to that problem. And sometimes that's through human capital. Other times it's, through other things that will help you through that. But those are two things that resonated with me as you were kind of walking through that, where I feel like a lot of people will be slower to say yes to certain opportunities. And there's a number of objections that they can bring up, whether it be time or skill set or whatever. But I think the common theme across those objections is that they're just letting fear get in the way. And I know one thing that we wanted to hit on today is how to go about not letting fear get in the way, because there was a quote that was shared with me that really resonated. It was something to the effect of, in the absence of fear, imagine what's possible.
Mhm.
And that really rung true to me. So I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on the topic of fear and how you've worked through that in your life and in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, fear. We all want to do great things. And when you work in an industry like we do, where it's individuals, hopes, dreams, aspirations, children, retirement, parents, homes, that we're really influencing, it's easy to let fear take over, a fear of doing something wrong or a fear of making a mistake. Because the consequences of those mistakes, particularly if you're a financial advisor or someone who serves them like I do, they can be profound in people's lives. And when people are afraid, they focus on that. What they don't focus on is the profoundly wonderful consequences you can have on people's lives if you do great work. And my guidance to anyone who's looking to build a career or do something impactful is to focus on that. Focus on all the wonder that you can create in someone's life if you do fantastic work. And to trust that if you weren't capable of doing it, people wouldn't be asking you to. There's fundamentals in your expertise in how you come to work and what you do and how you think and how you deliver that people want to build on. And along the way, also always keep top of mind that you're creating your own library of frameworks, approaches, methodologies, math that you've used in one context that you can apply to another. And so in my case, when I was asked to build a wireless trading platform early in my career, I knew a ton about active traders. I knew a lot about what they needed and why that needed to be instantaneous. I knew nothing about the technology. But I was asked to be product owner for that technology. And I worked really, really closely with some incredibly technical people who didn't know anything about the client. And we paired up and partnered up and built something really special. And so, don't be afraid about something you don't know. Be confident in what you do know and be confident in this opportunity creating great things for the client you're trying to serve.
Yeah, if I were to sum that up, and I don't mean to continue trying to extract motivational quotes, but sometimes I can't help myself. But, when people say, some variation of, well, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And if they say, well, what if it doesn't work? The easy response is, well, what if it does?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And focusing on, a positive outcome as opposed to all the reasons why you can't do it. And also understanding that, like, you're not going to theorize your way to the solution. Like, you're going to work towards a solution by tripping and falling and picking yourself up and doing it a little bit differently and refining and tinkering and actually taking action on the things, that are required to accomplish whatever task is at hand. So I'm glad you shared that perspective, because it's basically just taking more of a positive outlook to the situation at hand as opposed to, a negative, all the reasons why it can't be done type of mindset.
And also just like people get stuck in a morass of problems being too complex or things being too hard. And if you approach an opportunity from the perspective of everything being solvable, just take that first step and then that second step and then that third step. And over time, you always find the path to the solution. And another inspirational quote is, imagine, what would you do if you couldn't fail? Like, what would you do if failure was not a possibility? Well, you would probably do some pretty impressive things. And why not try that?
Yeah. And on the point of complexity, and then I want to kind of transition to the opportunity that kind of these rocky markets that we're currently seeing ourselves in, staying on the positive outlook theme, how we can kind of use that to our advantage as it relates to relationship building. But oftentimes these complex problems, it's just figuring out, like, what's the first thing that you can do? Like, if you got a big elephant in front of you, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So the first exercise is just figuring out what are those bites that we need to work through, pull in the right people, pull in the right resources, and just one by one, lay one brick at a time, so to speak. But one thing that I did want to hit on is, with the current market environment, I feel like advisors can be polarizing in that they're either over communicating or they're grossly under communicating. And when I talk with advisors, I hear that, hey, I want to get out in front of this. I want to add value. I want to spend some more time with my clients. I want to be empathetic to the situation at hand. And I lean towards that camp. And then there's advisors who say, well, I don't want to ruffle the feathers because my phone's not ringing, which means it doesn't seem to be an issue, but there may also be emotions festering over there that you're not proactively addressing. So I'm curious to know, based on the current market environment, how can advisors use this situation at hand to stay close with clients and help them stay the course to ultimately reach their goals?
So, the polarization that you just described, it's real and it's human nature. Investors are also polarized in the same way. Some just aren't opening their accounts right now because they don't want to think about it. And then when markets are, accelerating, they open their account every day because they want to think about it. Whereas others are, engaged in the market and want to engineer what their portfolios are in times like this. So advisors and investors are both polarized. As it relates to serving your clients, though, in a market environment like this, time and time again, and I've seen many tough markets in my career, some extremely tough, like the financial crisis, and others that were very short-lived. And the advisors that win, the advisors that grow, the advisors that get referrals from their clients, the advisors that create long and enduring relationships with their clients are the advisors that are communicating now. And they're not over communicating. In other words, they're not stirring the pot of fear. They're not too technical in their communications because investors, many of them can't absorb, daily market updates. They just start tuning them out. They're the advisors that check in with their investors periodically and when something important happens. And they do it in a way that reinforces the work that the advisors and the investors have already done together. So, a day like earlier this week when the Fed met and determined that they were going to raise interest rates by 75 basis points, that's a big event. Or when GDP was negative for the second quarter the next day, those are big events. And advisors, the best ones, are communicating with investors about, hey, these things happened. You might be reading about them, but we have a plan. And our plan was, we discussed this plan. Our plan is long-term in nature. This type of market environment we're in, while different, because everyone is different, is not outsized relative to other recessions or relative to other bear markets. And so let me know if something new's come up in your life, or let me know if you'd like to discuss the plan, but we have a plan. And they also do the same thing. Let's say, a couple months or a month and a half have gone by, markets, taken a downturn over the course of whatever that period of time is. Great advisors make sure they're checking in with their investors periodically as well. So some do it once a month, some do it once a quarter. I would argue once a month in this type of environment is probably right, where they're just simply saying, hey, I'm your financial advisor. We have a financial plan. This is what the financial plan says. Let me know if you need me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And my experience with those types of interactions between the advisors and the investors is they always lead to great conversations where the investor feels heard and understood. And it also always leads to the investor making long-term decisions, not short-term decisions, which is to the benefit of their overall financial life. And so at AssetMark, what we're doing is we've put together a volatility toolkit for our advisors. That volatility toolkit has two parts. First is best practices in communications, frequency, type, tone, all of those things, channel. And then the other part is, what's happening in the market and how you can have a great conversation with your clients so that they feel informed and that you're serving them. And we know, because we've worked with advisors through multiple markets like this one, that over the long term, the advisors who engage with their clients, they grow, and they grow a lot more.
I think too, something that's commonly overlooked by advisors, because there was a lot of folks where when COVID first happened and there was a sharp dip in the market, It was like the water receding like very quick. You get to see kind of what's really going on. And I saw that there was a lot of advisors who figuratively, and who knows, maybe literally, were like hiding under their desk, right? And like, oh my God, the world is burning, so to speak. But then there were other advisors who, through that communication that you just hit on, went on the offense, and they grew a lot. Like a lot of them had their best year for new client acquisition, new assets, and they were crushing it. And then the advisors, when they finally crawled out from underneath, they realized that they missed a really, really big opportunity because typically people are more willing to have conversations when there's uncertainty because they're looking for clarity. So with the current market conditions, first and foremost, you have, in my opinion, and I would guess in yours too, an obligation to communicate and give, because sometimes clients just want to be heard, like you said, like just let them vent, and kind of share their thoughts. And we've all had those conversations where, someone tries to jump in and give you feedback and you're like, no, I just want to get this off my chest. And a lot of clients are probably similar in that nature. But first and foremost, you have an obligation to communicate with your clients. But as a result of that, your clients are probably going to communicate with their friends and family and coworkers about the peace of mind that you provided them, and most likely generate conversations over time with new prospects. So I think it has a business development aspect to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the takeaway. Advisors, clients who are served by advisors that are communicating with them and not communicating with them in times like this. It's also, when growth returns, you have outsized bonuses, you have new executives, you have small businesses that are sold, and your current clients are in the community of people who aren't currently seeking or receiving advice. But if your clients are broadcasting, wow, I made great decisions during the pandemic and my advisor really went out of their way. Some advisors, like they brought meals to their clients that were elderly at the beginning of the pandemic. We at AssetMark, we researched what was happening with all sorts of federal programs so that we could share with advisors and they could share with their clients federal programs and aid that was available, especially for small business owners. That was really hard to understand and incredibly important. So to our earlier point about stepping out and stepping up, can we provide this information about assistance? Can I do something extremely different to help my clients feel safe? The advisors that did that and the companies like ours that did that really grew. And again, it's just the foundation so that you're getting more than your fair share of future growth. It's also the right thing to do. I mean, it's also just the right thing to do. So.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the challenges that advisors face could simply be solved by being a good human and like actually giving a right, about the folks that they're serving and, really wanting to, have an impact on them. But on the same path of growth, obviously a market downturn is not the only way and time that an advisor can grow. And there's multiple paths that advisors can grow. And you work with a variety of advisors over at AssetMark. What are some of those paths that you've seen? Because I'm sure that there's some folks listening today that may enjoy hearing, what those paths are.
So our advisors at AssetMark are independent fee-based advisors. And independent fee-based advisors that want to be not conflicted by any sort of product or any sort of other financial question their client could ask. This type of advisor, the calls on their time have never been greater, whether it's increased regulation, increased use of technology, the labor market being what it is, clients expecting a lot more from advisors in terms of the channels they serve them through, the type of information they're asking for, just the depth in terms of trust or tax or other areas. So there's just an infinite amount of calls on those advisors' time. So one growth path is for advisors to say, wow, there's just not enough time in the day for me to answer all these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specialize. I'm only going to work with employees at a big firm that's in my local community because I can be the expert on their 401k. I can be the expert on their stock plan. I can be the expert on real estate and taxes and everything as it relates to this niche that I can serve. And advisors do very, very well when they're specialized and niche oriented because they are those experts. They're the natural choice for those clients. And many of our advisors do that and they build thriving businesses and they grow. Some people specialize, in divorce. Other people specialize in small businesses. So there's many ways to specialize. And those specialist or niche advisors, they do very well. They tend to have smaller staffs. They tend to have more similarities in their client accounts. And so less complexity in technology and back office and all of that. So that's one way to grow. Another way to grow is an advisor saying, I want to serve a broader group of investors, but I can't do it myself. I can't be CTO, CIO, CFO. And those advisors sometimes join bigger firms. They want to be part of an ensemble of a larger firm where there's commonality in terms of point of view and perspectives and types of clients they serve. Other advisors are like, I don't want any of that. I just want to provide financial advice. And those advisors tend to be bought or to move back into more captive channels like wirehouses or regional broker dealers. And then there are other advisors who are like, look, I want to have a broad business. I want to grow my client base. I want to grow, but I can't do, nor do I have any interest in the technology or the investment. And these advisors tend to be very, very passionate about wealth management or financial planning. And that's what they want to do. They want to be a wealth manager or a financial planner. And they're very similar to the niche advisors that I talked about, where they want to do one thing and they really believe in it. And so they want to get rid of everything else. The way that they grow and they scale is they say, I need somebody else to do my marketing. I need somebody else to do my technology. I need somebody else to do my investment management. I need somebody else to do my operations and service. I need somebody to give me help and guidance as it relates to my, financial decisions and operations. And that's where companies like AssetMark come in, because we take all of that so the advisor can focus on their client, whether it be their niche or broad financial planning, and do that extremely well. And what we find at AssetMark is advisors who outsource, they break through that complexity. They break through that ceiling of complexity. It dramatically accelerates their growth. They grow faster than they're twice as fast as advisors like them that don't outsource. They have happier clients, much happier clients. They feel like they have a better quality of life, and their satisfaction with the client satisfaction with the investment returns are higher as well, because the quality in the view of the investor goes up. At AssetMark, we want to empower independent fee-based advisors who are part of a community to be able to compete even against the massive players that are all around them.
So we have a part of our coaching program, an exercise, if you will, that is called an Energy Audit. And it's basically similar to Stephen Covey's time management, 4 quadrants. It's 4 quadrants as well. So it's, things that you love to do and you're great at, things that you like to do and you're good at, things that you don't like to do, but you're still good at, and then ultimately the things that you don't like and you're not good at. And as you're deciding through all the different models that you just walked us through, I think it's an important exercise to go through to determine, based on your zone of genius, based on what activities within your business absolutely light you up, which of those models keeps you in that first quadrant of things that you love to do and that you're great at. And then how can you, through teaming, through joining, through acquisition, through whatever scenario it is, how can you get those other 3 quadrants taken off of your plate, as best as possible? But I think regardless of, and I think you laid out 4 or 5 channels there, regardless of the channel that you choose, one of the things that they all have in common is ensuring that your service to your clients is at the core of almost every decision that you make. Natalie, help me understand from your perspective, like, what should service mean to a client? How do you create a service model that's, quite frankly, actually worth talking about to their family and friends and coworkers and the types of folks that you want to serve? How do you think through service?
So thanks for that question. It's interesting. You were mentioning your 4 quadrants of things you like to do, don't like to do. I always talk about things that feed you, things that take from you. I would encourage advisors to ask those questions to their clients. Because if what you love to do and are spending your time on is things that your clients don't appreciate or value, then you have another challenge. First thing I want to say about service is a choice. You choose to invest in your service. You choose to have a service model. You choose to be client focused, which means you have to be learning from your clients all the time. You have to be investing in your service all the time, and you have to be improving it all the time, because people's expectations of service aren't generated in your small industry. They're generated all around you from the experiences your clients have in their everyday life. And so at AssetMark, our service and operations team, which leads the charge on service, they're obsessed with their clients. And they talk about being obsessed with their clients all the time. If we want to do a great job for our clients, what will we do? If we want to be obsessed with our clients, what will we do? How do we wow our clients? And they're always stretching themselves towards that wow or towards that obsession, because they know they're asking themselves the right question. At AssetMark, more generally, outside the service and operations organization, we have a mission, which is to make a difference in the lives of our clients and their clients every day. And every decision we make runs through that filter. every single one. And every time anyone in our sales and service organization tell us a client needs our help, anyone at AssetMark will drop what they're doing and give that client a call and try to solve that issue for them. And you have to build a culture. I mean, AssetMark's had that culture since the beginning, long before I joined AssetMark, but you need to build, foster, and reinforce that culture every single day, because there's always things that seem urgent and important from a business perspective, but your clients need to be the most important thing. And then the last thing I'll just say is you have to talk to them a lot, because what made them happy last year might not make them happy this year. It might not be enough. Their needs of you might change because the environment around us is changing. And so we have to listen hard to what our advisors need and adjust accordingly. And again, people talk about sales cultures, marketing cultures, whatever. We're a client culture. And a client culture means you're a service culture.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't know how much you know about one of our business partners, Dan Allison. He has the feedback marketing methodology, and that's one of his core tenets is directly getting feedback from clients. But the other thing that I would say too, and I promise this has a point, even though it will seem unrelated for a moment, if you can walk around life as an advisor and just be very aware of all of your other experiences, those experiences can either be replicated or avoided in your business model. So 2 quick examples. One, there's a really good Mexican restaurant near where I live, and I called to place an order for pickup, and it was like, press 3 to, place an order for pickup. So I pressed 3 and I said, hey, I'd like to place an order. And she said, oh, you have to order it online. And I was like, I literally just pressed 3 to place an order. What do you mean? And she wouldn't take the order. And I was like, okay, well, I ended up going somewhere else just out of principle. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And on a more positive note, I sought out actually from Dan Allison's recommendation, more of a concierge style doctor, more intimate relationship, not like transactional, like in a hospital setting. And anyways, I had a specific question for him that I shot him an email about shortly after our first meeting. And he replied with an answer and also said, to learn more about that, here's a podcast that I did, and here's a blog that I did where you can learn more about it. So both of those examples essentially is if you experience anything in your personal, walking around kind of life moments that make you cringe, is like, why would they ever do that? Make sure that your business isn't functioning in that way. And anything that brings you joy or has a positive experience, take it from that industry and apply it, to your business. And I think that with your service, and I would go as far as to say your experience model that you have with clients, you should be constantly tinkering and trying to improve and take that obsessive mindset that you alluded to basically pass around smiles to all the people that you're serving and get them to want to talk to you and take out their emotion. Because if you're just meeting their expectations, they're not going to talk to other people about you.
It's so important. And by the way, I love your example about your healthcare experience, because healthcare isn't the most service-oriented experience for most of us. We can all name examples of where healthcare hasn't been very service-oriented. But what I loved about that example is something that we talk about at AssetMark is complete work. Like, you were really thrilled when you got that email back, because
I screenshotted it and sent it to like 4 people. I was like, look how cool this is. And one of them already became that physician's client.
Right. So you were just thrilled that you got the email back, but then they also gave you more information so you could learn more. That's complete work. That's not, oh, I'll just respond. I'm going to respond in a way that sets this apart. I'm going to respond in a way that makes David feel awesome. That's complete work. That's striving for the wow. That's being obsessed. And we can all do that every day. We can do that for each other. We can do that for clients. We can do that for colleagues. We can all do that every day. Take that extra step.
Love it. So before we wrap up, one of the last topics that I wanted to hit on with you, Natalie, is there's kind of 2 things going on. One is, generally speaking, the average age of an advisor is more so towards the tail end of their career. There's a lot of clients in that age group as well. And there's a common thing that I come across where these older advisors don't necessarily want to serve the younger advisors or that next generation because maybe they're not profitable. Maybe they don't care because they're in the last 5-10 years of their career. But you and I both know that this sort of emerging generation of investors are going to be very profitable, not just based on their income and their savings, but ultimately when that wealth does transfer to them, which it will. So I'm curious to know how advisors, regardless of age, but how advisors can tackle that challenge and ultimately maximize the opportunity with the emerging generation of investors.
So, interestingly, if you look at it from a percentage basis, baby boomers actually, as a percentage, have the least percentage of investors at 43%. Gen X has 59, millennials have 64, and Gen Z has 54. So all pretty materially larger percentage of investors in those generations than boomers. But boomers control the most of the wealth, or the vast majority of the wealth. And I would argue that with the generational question, there's sort of two issues at play. The first is advisor driven. Many advisors are deeply, deeply satisfied by what they do. And as a result, they're not eager to retire. They're active in their communities, they're serving their friends, they've provided great service, they've created wealth. And, so work has transformed into something for them, which is the reason that they're not necessarily looking to grow. They're not necessarily, in some cases, looking to bring on younger clients. Even so, I would argue that those advisors who have these, businesses that they've built over their lifetimes have a responsibility to the younger generations of those families. Again, you want to leave the family in a good place, not just through legacy planning and trusts and estates and all of that, but also by helping educate those younger generations so that when they inherit the wealth, they can use that as the basis for their own life. And so, many advisors are hiring younger, more diverse financial planners to help them serve the younger generation. And the best of those advisors are actively engaging the Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X through their life. So it's not right about, when their client is about to pass on or, going into long-term care or anything like that, that they start a relationship with the next generation. They're starting it much earlier. They have workshops going into college, beginning credit, how you buy a home. They have these workshops that are ways for them to start these relationships. So that's one path. For the advisor that's much more focused on the business that they've created in their life, but not necessarily growing. For advisors who want to grow, the most important thing for them to understand is each of these generations is very different. And they're different because when they came of age, markets and experiences with financial services were different. So when you look at millennials that came of age at the turn of the millennium, they're very risk averse. They've seen market dislocations, a pandemic. They've seen the great financial crisis, all younger in their lives. And as a result, they're a little less trustful of financial services, a little less interested in speculative investments or taking risks. They started investing later in life. Contrast that to Gen X and Gen Z. Gen X, we came of age in the 90s. Very positive market, lots of new instruments, lots of success, lots of wealth created. And Gen Z, same thing. Lots of market appreciation, new financial instruments being created, lots of success with cryptocurrency and digital assets. And so you have to know the differences between the clients you're serving, and you have to appreciate that creates a different mindset. Not so surprisingly, Gen Z seeks advice because they want to get better, do better, learn more. Millennials don't seek advice because they're fearful and distrustful of, the industry. Gen X is somewhere in between. And so just make sure you know who you're serving and make sure that your offering has the breadth and depth it needs to serve those clients. And then the other thing is just make sure that you're educating. And, part of education is being familiar with the types of things that are interesting to these generations. And I'm super excited about financial services right now because even though the average age of the financial advisor is quite on the high end, the new classes of financial advisors that have been happening through the CFP designation and others have never been more diverse and have never been more excited to enter the industry. They're focused on doing good and they're focused on building relationships in typically underserved communities. And so I think that's really exciting too. We tend to focus on the average and the upper end of the average. On the left side of that average, there's a lot of really, really great things happening. never more women in the industry than now, never more diverse populations in the industry than now, never more focused on behaviors and psychology and pro bono than we are right now.
I love it. And I think too, even with like millennials as an example, speaking as one myself, I think one thing to note, which if you're very proactive with this portion, you can work through that distrust or that fear because the relationship kind of trumps all. If you have a really good relationship with them early on, they'll trust you enough to work together. I think too, building that relationship, you got to kind of meet them where they're at. So what are a lot of people doing right now, especially the younger generations? They're on their phone. They're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, whatever the platform is. Create some content, build a relationship in a leveraged manner, stay relevant in their lives. And outside of the fact that it's just the right thing to do to take care of the next generation, there's a really good business case for this too, for when you ultimately decide to step away from the business and figure out what your succession plan is, whether it's, an internal buyout from another advisor at your firm or a buyout from another company, like your business is more valuable if you're working with multi-generations and younger folks who are still in the accumulation stage, as opposed to your book of business being the same age as you and they're all drawing from their accounts. That affects your valuation. So there's a mathematical reason to focus on this outside of, just being a good person and doing it because of that.
Yeah, and David, I'm so glad you mentioned that for two reasons. The first is circling back to the first conversation we had where we were talking about, types of communication you do in an environment like this one. It's most important you do it for millennials because they're going to be the most fearful. And you're right, they're the most community oriented. They value their community and their community's advice over any expert. And so hopefully your advisor is part of that community, part of your community. And hopefully your advisor is sharing things with you and your colleagues that say things like, 75% of the time markets go up. 75% of the years since the 20s, markets have gone up. Doesn't mean that 25 of those years weren't down. It just means that those down years, they tend to happen and be very punctuated and very painful. And you lose about, on average, I think it's 31% of your assets. But man, in a bear market, which lasts instead of just shy of 1 year in terms of the bear market, in a bull market, it's usually 4.4 years long on average, and it returns 153%. And so the patience you have now, and every one of these environments feels horrible, but the patience you have now can really pay off in the long term. So thanks for mentioning that. I think it's a really important aspect of millennials to focus on community.
For sure. And before we transition and start to wrap up the show, I just want to say that this was probably one of the most jam-packed episodes with very little fluff along the way. There was a lot of really really golden nuggets, implementable ideas and strategies, and on a variety of topics. So it's a very condensed version, but I think it almost has a workshop feel of, hey, we talked about these 5 or 6 different things and short little quick hits. So I appreciate all the value that you've added today, Natalie. I do want to transition though. So if this is your first time listening, this is a great episode to first listen, by the way. But if it is your first time listening, one of the questions that I ask all of our guests is to tell us a book that's had an impact on them, whether it be personally or professionally or both. And the whole purpose is to distill a reading list for our listeners. And I'm willing to bet that Natalie, who's a CEO of AssetMark, which is publicly traded, you probably want to read the stuff that she's read. But one of the books that was brought up, Natalie, was more of an author. What you mentioned was anything historical. The author is Erik Larson. So tell me about how some of his books have had an impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really hard time picking one book because there's so many great ones. I really love fiction, but I find myself reading a lot of nonfiction because in many ways, life is just really interesting and bizarre, and there's so much to take from it. And Erik Larson, for those of you who've read his books, is just incredible. And what he says about the history that he writes is that it's small person history. He tries to find individuals that have had a huge impact that are just everyday people. And it's absolutely fascinating. Some of the books that he reads, a recent one is The Splendid and the Vile, which is about World War II and Nazism. But an old one that I really love is Isaac's Storm. And it's about a hurricane meteorologist in Galveston when a huge hurricane hit Galveston. And this meteorologist was very wrong. And as a result, there was a huge toll on Galveston in terms of lives lost and property and all sorts of things. And one of the reasons that I love Eric Larson is you can absolutely see yourself in the books that they write. And the characters, the main characters, are so human. And in this particular case, the meteorologist just didn't believe in technology. He just didn't believe in what he could know that he couldn't have known in the past. And I think that's just a great lesson for all of us. You know, technology seems new and random and sometimes a little scary, but take the time to really understand it, because not understanding it can have big impacts and, you know, on your life and on your business. And from a competitive perspective, if you're not understanding it, someone else is. I would encourage all of you to read Isaac Storm. It's quite a short book. It's really wonderful. And I bet 9 out of 10 of you will read Isaac Storm and then read everything Eric Larson has written, because he's just a great writer.
Love it. I'll have to check that out. Natalie, if I'm an advisor and I'm listening to this and your message resonated with me, I'm not familiar with AssetMark and the value prop and what exactly you all provide to advisors, where's the best way to take a look at partnering up with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So best way to get more information about AssetMark is assetmark.com, our website. You can also follow me or other AssetMark teammates on LinkedIn. And we're always happy to help advisors find their way, their path to grow. As I said, our mission is making a difference in the lives of advisors and their clients. And the first pillar of our strategy is meeting advisors where they're at. So David, I loved it. You said that earlier. And so AssetMark's truly a company that's all about advisors and helping them and their clients achieve their dreams. We'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Well, Natalie, I want to thank you. I also want to give a shout out and thank your right hand, Elena. Elena was instrumental in not only the coordination of making this happen, but also helping refine our agenda and our talking points and doing our best to sort of stay organized. So big shout out to Elena for helping on that front. And Natalie, I appreciate your time, appreciate you joining, and look forward to continuing to build our relationship. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, David.